My question is that there is also fundamentally something similar between India and America, which is democracy. That's the similarity we have. And this democracy rests on one thing: peaceful
Right.
transition. Do you think that
Yeah.
something which the entire world witnessed can be repeated again?
Sure. Thank you. I will not beat around the bush. I will give a straight answer to your question. As someone who loves and teaches U.S. history, I love this question. First of all, yeah, I saw some slides talking about flashing, talking about the election of 1800, which is my favorite election so far.
Yes.
That's when the whole peaceful transfer of power concept came into
Jefferson.
play. There was peaceful transfer of power. Another instance I want to talk about is, which is not flashing on the screen, is the election of 1876, which is really important, more important than many people think. That's when Rutherford Hayes was elected. So at that time, there was a confusion. And this scenario repeated in 2020, which is why I'm talking about it, is when multiple slates of electoral college voters were submitted to the Congress. There was confusion. That's when Electoral Count Act of 1887 came into play to avoid any future issues. Even before that, there was an issue regarding vice presidential election. Throughout the history of America, vice president was never elected, right? So then, after a certain incident, they made sure that people cast a vote separately for vice president and president to avoid confusion, right? So now coming back to 2020, or 2021, I should say. In 2022, the bill was passed. This is the answer to your question. Well, it cannot answer all questions in the world, but it will answer some of the questions related to peaceful transfer of power. In 2022, the Biden administration passed a law. I'm going to give a different dimension to your question. I'll still answer it. It's called ECRA, Electoral Count Reform Act, I believe. So according to that, it eliminated any possible, again, we cannot solve all the problems because we cannot predict all problems. It eliminated scope for problems which occurred in the past. In this case, if there's an issue with the slate of electors which have been given to the Congress, it has to pass at least a 20% strength in the chambers in order for it to be debatable. In other words, one person in Congress cannot raise their hand and make it a big issue. It has to pass the 20% muster. That's number one. Number two, the vice president, someone was talking about certifying elections. Vice president is a person who actually certifies elections because he's a president, or he or she is the president of the Senate. Back then, it was Mike Pence. Now it would be current vice president, which is Kamala Harris. So she has to certify, regardless of who wins, regardless of she wins, regardless of Trump wins, she would be the person to certify because she's the sitting vice president. So the role of vice president when it comes to certification would be, I should say, ceremonial or just performing ministerial duties. Otherwise, we saw the backlash on Pence for unwilling to certify the elections, right? So think, and lastly, federal court. They also provide this act, which is more important, and I'm not sure why media is not talking about this, American media, is the direct role of the federal courts. I love constitutional law. I don't practice, but I teach constitution. So it's about the involvement of federal courts. There would be a direct role. This would be sent to a court with three judges,
Okay.
one from federal district and two from corresponding circuit courts, and then they will handle that. And very quickly, a quick digression. I know you were talking about abortion before. Um, I want to talk about this. There is a fundamental difference between the Indian judiciary, because I love law, between Indian judiciary and the U.S. Judicial system. The I'm going to be a little critical here. The Indian judiciary is totally opaque, right? The collegiate system, we all know, no, we all know how the collegiate system works. We don't know how they get appointed. Nobody knows. So on the other hand, the U.S. Judicial system is not opaque. It's partisan leaning, but it's not opaque. And the Dobbs judgment, which overturned the Roe v. Wade judgment, happened partly, again, partly, not completely. One of the factors is the
Okay.
majority of conservative judges. The U.S. judicial system, there is partisanship in the justice system.